Live.
Hey, and we are live. How you guys doing today? Welcome to the Profiteers Thursday Night Live at 9 p.m. Today we have the wonderful Ross, and as has happened in the past, today is no different. We have a man who has done so many things that my old brain cannot remember them, so I have to go and look at my notes. So Ross was a DJ at 18 years of age. He spent 11 years on the air, finished an online career at CKXL in Calgary. He began selling radio advertising in 1974. I like to add that I was 4 years old because I never get to say I'm young. So this is a nice opportunity for me. Opened his own advertising agency in 1980, specializing in radio and television. Retired after 32 years to live the dream. Wrote 3 books on advertising that works, leaving a legacy, and how to write a book of your own. And finding wisdom in the broccoli, things I learned around the dinner table. Now he's launching a podcast called Leaving a Written Legacy. Now, there is so many topics we can pick from that list. Oh my God, you make me feel bad just sitting near you. But what I am interested in, we talk about this a lot on Soaring Profits, about changing your life at points of impact when things happen in your life and you have to make that switch. You have to go to something else. And so you had a very successful, it sounds like a successful career as a DJ. What in the world would make you change and go to advertising? Like, I would think that would be a scary leap, especially back then.
Let me explain. My brother was the one that got me into radio back in 1962. He worked at a radio station in Pointe Claire, Quebec. And I had my first visit at a radio station. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a DJ. These guys are great. They get paid to play rock and roll and talk. And I love to talk and I loved rock and roll. So I decided, yes, this is the route I'm going to go. But the getting into the radio part was kind of a natural because I wasn't good at anything else. I was never athletic. If I was going out, I never played catch because I always hated that. I'd catch the ball with my teeth and just go through my hands. But I could talk.
Right.
And I thought, this has got to be the dream. So I got into radio. I ended up working at a radio and television station in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, Alberta in 1963, January 1, 1963. What a thrill that was. And it was 45 below zero when I landed in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan. That's a long ways up north.
Yeah.
The years I spent on the air, I went to several radio stations from Lloydminster to Red Deer, Alberta, to Smiths Falls, Ontario. And incidentally, Smiths Falls, CJET, was the radio station. I was hired to do the morning show. And I was a very irresponsible 19-year-old kid. And I would chase girls at night and I would sleep in every morning.
Yeah.
And I got fired from the morning show in 1964. And here's the fun story about that. Years later, I met Rich Little. I don't know if you remember Rich Little or not, but he was a very funny guy. You remember Rich Little?
Yes.
Guy. Amazing. I met him, interviewed him in Windsor when I worked for CKWW there. And it turned out that Rich Little also worked at CJET in Smiths Falls.
Oh.
And he also got fired. We both did. And he was just the most charming celebrity I've ever met. But here's what happened. In 1974, I was married, I was mortgaged, and I was earning about half of what the lowest paid advertising salesman at the radio station earned.
Wow.
He was making $24,000 and I was making $12,000. And I had been on the air for 11 years.
Yeah.
So I said, I got to do this. And so they were very kind to me at the radio station. They gave me a chance to keep an on-air gig going. I did a Saturday morning ski show at the radio station.
A ski show?
Ski show, yeah.
Really?
I had free skiing at the big three ski areas. I
Yeah.
love to ski. And of course, living in Calgary, you're not that far from Banff, an hour's drive.
Yeah.
But I decided to get into sales, and I'll tell you what, that was a very big move. I almost quit, went back on the air because it was a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be. It was brutal.
So Ross, if I can ask a couple questions as we're going through. First of all, thank you for joining us. You've been kind of one of the guests we've been looking forward to for a while. I know we had planned it earlier in the summer, and some things have come up, and I'm so glad you're able to make it. We had an opportunity to chat briefly before we came on here today, and I'm very excited for what we're going to put together this evening. So first of all, thank you. Secondly, question, like when you were on air and you're talking about $12,000 a year salaries, there's not a lot of guys in today's environment where they're getting out of bed for $12,000 a month.
That's right.
Right.
That's
and to me, here we are. I'm kind of the finance guy, right? James is a little more the touchy feeling. God bless him. That's his gig. I love it. But,
I still wouldn't get out of bed for that.
That's what I mean, right? So it's one of those things, and we talk about inflation, we talk about costs of houses and that sort of thing. Do you mind if I ask approximately what real estate you were buying for, making $12,000 a year? Like a cost of a house, a cost of a car, those sorts of things. And I know I'm probably dating myself a little bit here when I have these conversations, but I really think it's important for a lot of our audience to understand is that you cannot satiate yourself at today's wage going, I make six figures, I'm a rock star.
Yeah.
You have to be moving constantly. And that's kind of the story and what I love about when James pitched that Ross was going to come on and the progression of what you've done in your career. So you go.
Okay, Patrick, our first home was in Calgary, 80 Haysboro Crescent. I'll never forget it. I love that house. My first house.
Yeah.
It was $20,500. And I thought, how am I going to be able to make the mortgage payment?
Right.
Because the mortgage payment was $190 a month. Now, that didn't leave me with a whole lot left over. When you're making $1,000 a month, to take $200 out of it, that's, the $1,000 is before taxes, right? Yeah. Well, after tax money. And of course, we ended up selling it for $33,000 a year later. No, not a year, 2 years later. Moved to Ontario and suddenly found, oh my God, I didn't make that much money after all, because the comparable house is going to cost $40,000.
No.
Yeah.
But the first house, yes, it was $20,500. I'll never forget it. And we just loved that house. I mean, the pride of ownership was just amazing.
Well, fast forward to 1997. I was just about to have my daughter, and it was $111,000 for me to buy a house. And same thought. I thought, I don't know how I'm going to make this mortgage payment. I'm going to have to start hustling. I'm going to have to start doing things because it's going to take a large chunk of my monthly income to keep it. But I had to have a house. Like I always wanted one. So it's funny how it fast forward. And now I would dream about buying a $111,000 house. Like if there's one out there, I'll buy 6 of them.
Of course.
Hilarious way how it changes. But then, like buying things back then was a little bit cheaper too. But that's super interesting. So you were talking about your transition and like how scary it was. Like I could not imagine. And, I've had a few transitions in my life, and I remember like the thought. So there's a couple of stages. There's the first stage where you start thinking about it and you kind of sit back and you're like, I don't know if this is the right move. And then, like you said, when you get into it, there's that period of time where you're like, oh my God, I've made the worst mistake in my life. So what was the trigger that you were like, oh man, I did the right thing? What was that moment for you?
I've got to tell you about the moments leading up to that moment.
Sure. Yeah.
When I started in sales, I was given a prospect list. Anybody who sold anything knows that when you get into a new situation, they'll give you a list of previous customers, and usually it's customers nobody else wants to do business with because they're such jerks.
Right.
And my first contact was a guy that owned an Army surplus store. I can't name names, but I'll never forget that call. I got a call. Oh, Ross, so-and-so wants you to go down and talk about advertising. Oh, great. I thought, ooh, this is my first sale. And I hopped in my little Volkswagen Beetle and I drove downtown Calgary and I stopped and I walked into the store and the owner of the store was looking at something with his wife and another guy. And I said, hello, I'm Ross Campbell. I'm with CKXL. Totally ignored. Okay. You wanted me to come here and see you? And the guy says, what's the rate? The rate of the commercials. I said, $13. That's outrageous. You guys are crooks. He said, that's a ridiculous amount of money. And I said, well, look, I saw my sales manager before I came down here, and that's the best rate we can give you. Then you're all liars. And I said, this is insane. I said, I don't have to take this crap.
Right.
And I walked out the door and slammed the door. So I'm going back. Yeah. Oh, and then you know what I did? I left my briefcase on the floor in the store. I had to go back here and get the briefcase. And they're looking at me stunned, like, how could this guy do this? And I'm thinking all the way back to my car, I'm fired. That's it. That's the end of my sales career. And it turned out that by the time I got back to the station, this guy had phoned the station, wanted to talk to me. And they said, Ross, Albert's on the phone for you. Got to talk to him. I said, oh, brother. Okay. Yes, Albert. Ross, he said, I want to buy 10 commercials a day for the next 2 weeks. And $15 is just fine. Just like that. Yeah. Now, that was kind of the typical beginning. Calgary was one tough city to sell advertising in, but it was a great learning experience.
Right.
But there were others so rude, so obnoxious that I really didn't think I wanted to do this. And I wasn't doing all that well until I learned about a Lloyd Bray method of selling, and it is called consulting selling. And once I mastered that, once I was given that direction, I became the top new business guy at the radio station in Calgary. And knowing I wasn't going to learn much more, I decided to come back to Toronto.
Right.
And work at CFRB at the time. CFRB was the biggest radio station in Toronto.
So Ross, for a lot of our listeners and watchers that are taking this in, can you describe that a little bit, that kind of methodology around consulting versus, simply demanding the product? I'm putting a product A in front of you. You need it because of X, Y, and Z. Can you kind of fill people in on that a bit?
This was the turning point, the TSN turning point in my sales career.
Yeah.
The Lloyd Bray method, I don't even know if it's around anymore, but it was all about setting up an appointment, telling the person that you only want to see them for 20 minutes, and then only ask questions. Say, I'm not going to try and sell you anything. I just want to go and talk to you. And maybe our radio station can help you make more money. Mm-hmm. Maybe not, but let me come and can we talk? And it opened up so many doors. First of all, CKXL was the only rock and roll radio station in the market. Right. So that it was like in Toronto, Chum was the giant, but then CKEY was close, but not close in audience, but close. Same format. But the idea was to go in, ask questions, come back and get people who knew how to put the presentation together. What do you suggest we do with this?
Right.
And it worked every time. You had to do the research. You had to give the client, the prospective client, a reason to say, hey, this makes sense for me. Right. And my first big sale was to Burke's Jewelers. They'd never been on a rock station before.
Wow.
And the contract was $35,000. And that was really a major step. And once I got past that, it was like, I can do this. And I love this. This is good.
I think I know what you're talking about. Like that. Sorry, I was watching, I don't know, I think it was TikTok, one of the videos I was watching on learning how to do what we do. And it was talking about, instead of going in and trying to sell them, you go in with the questions of what is the biggest thing you have to overcome in this area?
Exactly.
What is your biggest problem today?
That's right.
How those kind of questions, kind of exploring their business, and it gets them piqued and interested because they start talking about themselves, and then you get a fuller picture of what they are. Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly it, James. I mean, yes, that you almost have it down pat. What what I would ask. What is your biggest problem? What's your greatest opportunity? Who is your greatest competitor? Why?
Hmm.
And what do you think you have to do to beat them in the market? And yes, so then when I went back in to make the presentation, it'd be very thorough. I would also be addressing exactly what they talked about, their
Right.
competition, what they were doing well, what perhaps they weren't doing, and you could do better than them. And so it was just a common sense way to sell advertising. And I think it's a common sense way to sell almost anything.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
But Ross, it's funny you say that. My father passed away here recently, so I have all these fond memories when we have these conversations. And my father used to tell me as a young man, he goes, "You want to be wealthy, son?" He goes, "You solve problems for rich people."
You
And
got
if
it.
you go in, and a great example is your Burks. $35,000 in jewelry advertising at a house that's $20,000. That's $1.5 million worth of advertising in today's numbers, right? Like if you take it in the realm of number theory, right? That's a ton of advertising. But if you're able to go in and solve the issue or critique or work through the issue, solving a problem for someone that's in a position to finalize that deal, you kill it every time. And I think that's a fantastic thing. And I don't think we teach enough of that sort of thing in life.
No, I don't either. We don't teach this in school.
No.
I mean, we don't teach anything about success or motivation or common sense dealing with people.
Yeah.
We have a huge void. And as we chatted before we went on the air with our program tonight, we talked about the need to encourage and try to inspire young people to get into politics.
Right.
Even get into sales. Sales is not, it sometimes has been rhetorically referred to as being a larcenous group of people. I remember one sales manager said this to me, and he meant it, and it drove me crazy. He said, "Ross," he said, "if you're going to sell advertising, you got to have a little larceny in your soul."
I love it.
I was, okay, and I didn't
There's
work.
always an angle. That's the concept of the salesman, is that there's always an angle. There's always a position to be had. And your first rebuttal to my position, I got to be able to think on my feet.
You do.
And if you can't do that, if you're a very A to B linear thinker, that's a structural problem if you're trying to go in and kind of influence that process.
Yeah.
And that's what sales is. And it's always been for me, is that sales is an influence, what you're able to garner information, influence the decision making, and then close that sale. I love that. I think that's such a good. What was the name of the style? Because that's something I want to remember for later.
Lloyd Bray.
Bray. Okay.
No, now, this goes back to the 60s.
Right.
I mean, this guy is probably long gone.
Right.
But his method of selling was introduced to me in 1974.
Yeah.
No, 73, because I started selling actually in 73, still on the air. But it changed everything about the way I thought about advertising, the way I thought about selling things. It influenced everything I did from that point on, and even when I started my advertising agency, because that's exactly what I would do. And
so I would argue that, a concept of what that's doing, a book that I was read as a young man, again, from my father, was Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People. Yeah. And that's it is just uniquely human.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. And if you can tap into, earthly, uniquely human truths, they span the test of time. And I think that kind of parallels beautifully into kind of one of the things that you're very passionate about talking about is some of the stuff that you're doing with your books now.
Yeah. Well, I think that everything we do is our character is developed by people we hang out with. Our method of doing business is really defined by the people we trust and we respect and we spend our time listening to. That, to me, my friend, I have a best friend. I have a good buddy. He lives right here in Peterborough. Great guy. We've known each other for 55 years. But what we did, he was the athlete. I was the talker, the writer. And we got along famously because we both had a dream. We knew what we wanted to achieve, and we flat out did it. And it was fun. The journey was so good.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be here, but I never liked retirement that much, and I never really wanted to. My wife wanted me to because she wanted to travel. And I'm glad I did for her for as long as we could travel. But here I am. I want to work again. I love this.
Right.
I'm 77 years old, and I feel like 35.
Ross, I'm telling you right now, you come with an experience set that is sorely needed in today's society. And I was always, again, I'm an old soul. I hang around with this old guy over here, right? So yeah. So my group of friends tend to be a chunk older, probably 25 to 30 years older than me. And there's two reasons for that. Is I had a daughter fairly young, and I didn't have time to go hanging out with the boys at the bar on a Friday night. I was hustling, and I've built a real estate business. I've built my personal business, my family's business. We've developed a number of different things. And I tend to be more in line with someone like this here, he's had his kids, he's raised his kids, he's looking at that personal development and those next steps of hunger, as opposed to just, okay, I'll make my $1,000 a month to pay the mortgage and just keep the wolf away.
That's
right.
And
when you pivot and you, like you said, when you surround yourself with those like-minded individuals that are hungry, that are driven, that want that next thing, and it doesn't have to be monetary all the time. No. I always bug him because I'm kind of the money guy in the situation where I talk finance, I talk world economics, I talk that stuff, but it doesn't have to be. And that's something that this guy, being a little bit older, has a different perspective on than I do. Right. Yeah. So
I think you guys make a hell of a team. I really And by the way, if I would have said hell of a team back in 1963, I would have been fired, and I never would have gotten back on the air.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How come?
Really? Oh yeah.
Well, because of how?
I've got some great stories, I'll tell you, from early days of radio, and you had to be very careful and never, if you said damn, your station would have a visit by the CRTC and say, you better clean this language up. I mean, compare that to today.
We would have been shut down several times. We swear all the time on this show. We kind of go with the guest. If the guest is a little bit of a swear, we swear a little bit more. If they're not,
I don't mean to. I don't necessarily like it, but I think there's sometimes where it's appropriate, but often it isn't. I don't like vulgar humor. I love the humor of the guys from yesteryear. I don't know if you've ever heard Bob and Ray, but they are just the most insanely funny guys. Yeah. They never utter any profanity.
And Howard Stern was the shock jock. Yeah. He brought, he was that.
He's the one that broke.
I don't know what else he brought to the table other than, having midgets, throwing midgets and swearing and hookers. And that was his thing.
Yeah.
He wants to run for president, apparently.
It was all shock. I remember when I was a very, very young man, my dad sat me down because I swore. I can't remember why I swore, but I swore. Yeah. And he said, that's for when you're with your friends, your boys.
Yeah.
When you're with your grandma, when you're with your mom, when you're with me, you don't use that language. And you have to learn the difference. Because if you're on a job, you start talking like that, you're not going to be able to get a good job. So learn how to control your language. Your language should always be controlled to your situations. I'm not saying don't say it. I'm saying know when. And I always remember that. So I'm very careful. And I told my kids the same thing, that, it depends on where you are. There are times and places for that kind of language. And then there's times that you shouldn't ever say it. That's absolutely.
True. I think, I don't know, do you ever recall seeing anything with Steve Allen?
Yeah.
Yes. Allen was a late guy years and years ago. He was before Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
After he retired, he got a real bug in his ear about profanity and vulgarity in television. Yeah. And he wrote a book, and I love the title of the book. The book was called Vulgarians at the Gate. And his major complaint was how vulgar language was starting to insert itself into the regular daytime television shows. Yeah. And he wanted to boycott the advertisers. Now, he turned out he passed away, and it never amounted to anything. But I thought, he's right. That it's too bad, because the language, the great movies, the great super writers of movies, the ones that win the Academy Awards, there's very little vulgarity, but yet there's incredibly gripping, moving words.
Right. Yeah.
They care enough to look it up, to find another word, even make a new phrase up. I That's one of the great things about going to good movies.
Right. Well, I think I think it's very interesting when you go from someone like that, Mr. Allen, to where you go to, Mr. Jerry Springer.
Jerry.
Yeah, that's right. That's the obscene exact opposite.
Right? The pendulum swings, and you get that. Again, it goes back to that shock jock mentality. And I think, this is something that I very much wanted to talk about on, going through the cycle, the business cycle, if you will, of the radio advertising business. Again, where we are here in Peterborough, we have a couple of radio stations, but I would argue that their heyday is long past. Now everything is much more media driven in regards to online, the social media platforms. Since Facebook really has allowed for a very engaging experience that has probably, I would argue, has probably slit the throat of radio in so many ways, right? Do you have much insight into that? Like, have you dealt with and followed that business move?
I do. I subscribe to Broadcast Weekly.
Okay.
It's a Broadcast Dialogue magazine, and if you don't, you should try to get a subscription. It's really good. It is kind of the Bible of the broadcast industry. I kept on subscribing even long after I left the advertising world. And first, I like to find out who's dead that I worked with. Where are the obits? I gotta see who's no longer with us. So that's the first section I go to. Okay, we're missing Charlie, or whatever. They're gone.
Used to open to the center page at the Sun for the Sunshine Girl. Now it's obituaries.
That's what happens when you get old,
page, buddy. It was the first page on the.
It was the inside cover, right in here.
Page. Yeah. Number one, you flip it open. It was there until people complained.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a hell of an admission, isn't it? I mean, the truth of the matter is, I do like to just keep in touch. I do read the statistics about how many people are paying attention to podcasting, how many to AM radio, how many still listen to FM radio and television. And yes, the numbers are certainly diminished for the mass media of yesteryear. AM in particular has taken a pretty big hit. FM, not so much. Okay. It's still pretty strong. Podcast has a long ways to go to catch up. Right. I mean, I love the idea of doing this, and I really appreciate being here with you guys, because this is a brand new treat for me. But I still am an old media guy, and I think I still listen to radio. I listen more to Sirius XM though, right? Because I like the music, and the DJs are fabulous. They remind me of my era back in the '60s, where I had favorite disc jockeys. Love these guys, Juicy Brucey, Cousin Brucey out of New York, Joey Reynolds out of WKBW in Buffalo. Okay. These guys were amazing entertainers, and they're still on the air on Sirius XM on the 60s.
Now, are they still live or are they recording?
Oh, yeah. Oh no, they're live.
What kind of station are they on?
They're making millions of dollars, and they're mostly my age, but they sound exactly like they did in 1965.
Right.
The voice hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. The face has gotten wrinkled and roomy, but the voice is still there, and there's still personalities. They're fun to listen to.
Yeah.
So that's my joy listening to this.
I get that, because like every time I listen to you, it takes me right back to when I was a kid listening to the radio. Absolutely, your voice is it's there. But I would argue, Pat, getting to your question there. So when we had that 7-day power outage in Peterborough, it was 7 to 12 days, depending on where you live. Yeah. Radio was huge. Everyone there wasn't a person not listening to radio.
No, that's
there was no TV, there was no anything else. And the radio was what was keeping people together. And I think that there's still times like that. When you hop in your car, it's great that you have your phone to plug in, but I find that I'm always searching for something that, I'm going to enjoy. And if I just turn on the radio, it's a nice balance when I'm driving for an hour that I don't have to think about it.
You clearly haven't listened to Soaring Profits podcast, because that would be the first thing you would go to, and certainly turn on for any driving experience whatsoever. What is going on?
The problem is that that one guy, he's amazing, that Pat guy. full of hot air. I
don't know. Bullshit. No. Well, that's where I've always wondered, Ross, is for myself. I've been a Sirius subscriber for a very long time, and obviously you have a subscription paid service.
Yeah.
Like the fee on it is very irrelevant.
Amazing,
right?
Yeah.
So obviously they've removed a lot of the advertising budget that's coming in, the revenue streams from advertising, in propulsion in relation to the fee for service. Now, is that a better model? Like, obviously it's replaced radio in a lot of ways for a lot of people, but is it a better fundamental model, or do you still need some sort of advertising revenue rolling through that?
Actually, they don't need the revenue. I mean, it's like Netflix. If you get 10 billion people paying $10 a month, that's an incredible amount of money. And the announcers on Sirius XM are paid in the millions. They're paid a ton of money. I like to listen to the DJs, but I also like to listen to the local. I will tune in a local station, like James says, when I want to, if it's on the hour, because almost every AM radio station has news on the hour, right? And then I find out what's going on in Peterborough. I know that there's a hospital crisis. There's a crisis of a lack of nurses who want to work. They've been burnt out over the COVID period. And that's a problem. And I'd like to know, what are they doing to solve it? And I'm not getting that on Sirius XM. I'm getting good music and great disc jockeys. But I need the hard news too. And even the news on television, I tend to like radio quicker because it gets to the point. They don't have as much time for bebop. Let's get down to the short strokes of this story. So I'm a radio guy, but I love radio.
100%. Yeah.
Go ahead, Pat.
Sorry. Yeah. The question I was writing to is, you brought up a really good concept there with Netflix. So radio. So I have a bit of a bone to pick with Netflix because I think that they're probably in a decline. And the reason is that what we're doing right now, we're promoting live content up to the minute, whatever we're doing. And you can jump on YouTube. Whereas Netflix got in the business of making movies.
They did
millions and millions and millions of dollars to actors and actresses and set design and all the things that go along with that. Yeah. And they undercut the movie industry blockbuster, right? We used to go to the store movie. That was the disruptive technology, was Netflix.
Yeah, I agree.
I think YouTube is going to be the Netflix disruptor. And that's where I'm wondering is if there's something in the radio industry, like it's Sirius disrupted, broadband radio, if you will. Is there something to disrupt Sirius? Is there something that comes down the pipe that can be a local integrated? And this, I talk a lot about Tesla, the car company, and that the Tesla automotive itself is not really a car company. They are a computer tech company.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
And as you roll out, where in the next, they're saying couple years, where they're going to have autonomous driving. You don't have to pay attention to the road anymore. Now you are engaged in content. So what does that become? Right? Now you've got an hour commute to work. You're watching YouTube, Netflix, Twitter, right? All of these plays that end up coming in that monetize your entertainment dollar. And that's where I'm wondering. I'm always looking at disruptive technologies, how they're going to hit into a market and why they would be disruptive. So that's what I was wondering, if there was anything is there something disruptive to Sirius?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer to it. I never would have guessed that there would be a Sirius. I mean, I think it's fabulous that there is.
Right.
And certainly something will come along, and something is needed at the local level to get the local people inspired into something that's more hometownish. I think Netflix gives us cheap movies. They're like cookie cutter movies, same actors, and Liam Neeson must be in 5,000 movies on Netflix. We can't find a movie without Liam Neeson in it.
It's because he's cheap.
I love it.
Exactly. But I think like everything else, everything's evolving, and I would love to see. If I was younger, I would love to buy a radio station and say, I want to do something with this. I want to get you guys on the air here locally, and I want to make things happen. But I think it has to be integrated. Right. Whatever they do, they can't be just alone. It's no longer a lone signal. It's got to be something that's tied in with the internet. that's the new future.
Yep.
Netflix is internet, obviously.
Yep.
There's going to be others. Well, there are others. But mind you, I don't think anybody's really jumping out of the can right now and saying, hey, wow, I'm fabulous. I don't see anything fabulous.
Right.
Disney is not bad. They got some good stuff, but they have some moronish stuff too, you know? It's not the place to stay, but that's the way
it's hard because they're not making the movies that they used to make, the big, wonderful, well-written, because they're in such a hurry. It's like the news. The news went from like really good news stories that were well thought out, well rehearsed, to like now we got a 24-hour news cycle. We got to just keep on pumping it, you know. And we got to talk about it for 14,000 hours, and it just kind of ruins news. Totally.
How do you feel about Lisa LaFlamme? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I jumped in. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry.
No, you really should. No.
I was thinking about Lisa LaFlamme, who just recently lost her job, lost her contract. She, to me, was a classy news deliverer, and I think it was budgetary. And I think that's a real problem. Like, we're not allowing guys who are really good to stay on the air long. Gary Gibney, we talked about Gary Gibney. The other guy that was on CTV on during the weekend, really nice guy, great broadcaster, gone too soon. Too many guys going. And I don't know what I think. I want to go back to a time in 1974 when I went to work for CFRB as a salesman. CFRB at that moment, at 8 o'clock in the morning, had 500,000 listeners.
Wow.
Nobody else in North America had anything near that number.
Is that 1010, CFRB 1010?
It is, and 10 is a shadow of its former self in 74. In 1974, when I went to sell advertising there, a 60-second commercial was $200. A 30-second commercial was $95. Or no, 200, and the other one was 110. I mean, it was less, but it wasn't that much less. And selling spots commercials on CFRB at $200 would deliver more. If you bought 3 commercials at $200 and you reached 600,000 people, you will do more. You will get more out of it than you will if you run 20 spots reaching 20,000 people.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how it works. But we don't have it today because there's no Gordon Sinclair, there's no Betty Kennedy, there's no great ones, and they're getting rid of the great personalities. Lisa LaFlamme was fabulous. My wife loved Lisa LaFlamme. I thought she was gorgeous and wonderful. Yeah. And so I think that's a weakness we have in our media system. I think Bell owns too many. They're too big. And they dominate the market, and it's sad.
Well, Cora, I was just going to ask. I was going to say, how do you think Cora had an effect on Chorus? How did they have an effect on the radio business?
Actually, the problem is we have too few owners, and that means it's very, very difficult. A, to break into the business. B, to make any money in the business because they control the salaries.
Right.
And I don't know how to fix that. I mean, I'm not sure that it is fixable. I think we're just looking at a whole new world. Just it functions differently, you know. I'd like to see a change.
The Lisa LaFlamme thing, and again, probably over the last, especially 2 years, I have more or less stopped watching mainstream media.
Have you?
It's unwatchable to me anymore, and the reason is that it's awful. And looking at it from a lens is that I view things very much through a macroeconomic lens. I talk to the profiteers. That's what we call the people that watch us here.
Yeah.
I like it. It's like the Mouseketeers, right?
It's cool, yeah.
That's good. Yeah. But but I always talk to them about, like, follow the money, right? If you follow the money, you can figure out a lot of where the world is heading. And I talk a lot about macroeconomics and looking around the world and finding and pointing out things. And usually you can kind of get a bit of a headwind to the way things are moving. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we look at, you know, Turner Entertainment in the States, and we look at the Warner Brothers conglomerates that have pushed all the media. You've got about 3 organizations that really are propagating most of the propaganda that is the media in so many facets. And that's where I think that YouTube or other streaming type channels and platforms are fantastic.
Mhm.
They're dangerous. They're
Okay.
dangerous. They're
They sure are.
to a status quo. But if you're in a situation where I challenge people to think for themselves, I challenge people to try to do their own research. Like we talk a lot about here, Ross, is I'm not a bad little stock trader, and I've made a lot of money in the stock market. And I talk to people how to read the market, how to like chart stocks and to follow things. And I tell them, the first thing I tell them is that I'm explaining to you a process. Now, if you go out and you lose all your money, that's on you.
Yeah, right.
I'm asking you to think critically. And there's a lot of people that are like, I'm all in for that type of thing. Whereas I think that we had, I would argue through the mid 2000s, we had the development of the super hyped up 24-hour news cycle where it needed to be, if it bleeds, it leads to the extreme.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you have the development of, Trump, you have the development of all of these geopolitical issues that are rising, where, we have a situation here locally where you've got people that are going in and shutting down a police station over the weekend.
Yeah.
And they're trying to.
That story.
Oh, that was a good one, Ross. We had
Oh, wow.
a group of.
Oh, you didn't know that? Oh, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, we had a group of protesters here at the Peterborough Police Department. It's made national news. It's worth looking into, where they attempted to arrest the police officers under citizen's arrest.
Oh, my.
It was QAnon.
No, it's a woman. There's a woman here going around Canada. She calls herself the Queen of Canada.
Yeah.
And she is a libertarian type individual, right? And I'm all for free speech. I 100% believe she has the right to say whatever she wants to say, short of inciting violence and criminality.
Yeah.
And they crossed the line. So I think there was 3 arrests that were made, but they were literally putting hands on police officers, trying to arrest police officers.
Goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And it was over, the vaccine mandates and all that. And politically, I tend to lean not quite that crazy, but more that way. I don't think we handled COVID well, like financially and what we've set up. But I also not going and arresting guys with guns.
No.
So,
Oh, that's wild. Well, yeah, we do have that. We have that. That crazy. The crazies have come out. They're like the Proud Boys of the States, and
Right.
The Oath Keepers. That they're the right and everybody else is wrong. And of course,
Right.
let's have anarchy, because anarchy means that nobody's going to tell me what to do, and
Right.
nobody's going to arrest you either. And if you want to follow that logic, I suppose, there are a lot of people buying into it. I've seen all these pickup trucks with monstrous Canadian flags flying around town, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you're kidding! This is so American. It's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
What do you think about? What do you think about that? Like, Pat and I were talking about that. So it was just before Canada Day, and they were talking about not showing the Canadian flag, and the Canadian flag was bad, and we shouldn't celebrate Canada. And Pat and I were like, that's ridiculous. Like, the Canada flag is a symbol of hope and prosperity and peace, and like I hate that people are using it to try and like push.
They're wrapping it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it.
But I don't think we hide our flag because of it. Like, I still think we need to be proud of it. But it's funny that I have people that are like, they just see a flag. Like, I saw trucks way before this, and they'd have the flag on the back, or they'd have it, you have it in front of your house. But now it seems if you have that, it's what you said. I see it at Tim Hortons, and my first thought is, wow, conservative nut job. But it could be literally just someone who's proud in Canada.
Well, listen, we're talking about the freedom movement, right?
Right.
Yes.
And the freedom movement, I think they might have had some followers that made sense. That's what scares me about the current PC leader, the guy that's probably going to win, because he was supporting them, and I might turn and go straight liberal. If we end up having our conservative party run by radicals, radicals are bad, left and right, and I just see this freedom party movement of being angry. They are mad. They will sit and they'll make noise with their noisy pickup trucks, and they'll wave those big flags in our face and tell us that we're not as Canadian as they are because we don't wave the flag. I find that troubling.
Yeah. Are you talking Polyev? Pierre Polyev?
Yes,
Okay.
I am. Yeah. And I'm just finding the whole movement of being anti-government. It's not just anti-Trudeau, it's anti-government. And that's anarchy. And the anarchists go crazy in Britain. I mean, it's not that uncommon, but it's frightening when it starts to gain kind of traction here in our country. And I see it a lot in Ontario. And I don't like it. I'm just dead against it. That's why I want moderate leaders in my country. I don't want radical rights or radical left.
You're exactly right. I think our politicians are spending so much time, like Singh, the NDP leader, creates division all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Our liberal leader right now talks about division all the time. Like it's just no one talks about bringing the country together. What can we do right now to help the people that are hungry, that need money to buy houses, that need jobs? What are we doing for them? We're not trying to do anything for them. We're just trying constantly. Every time one of these politicians talk, they're talking about division, about how you did this. The way that Trudeau and like I do not support the Freedom Truck, whatever that the
Freedom Convoys. Yeah.
I don't support everything they said. There's a couple of things that I'm like, oh yeah, I get that. You know, freedom of speech and all that stuff. But for Trudeau to come out and say, I'm not going to sit down and talk with his own Canadian people. There were a lot of people there, and say, because you are racist and all this stuff, when clearly they, like, maybe some of them were, but clearly they were not doing anything other than mostly, like, I didn't see any damage done. I didn't see any, like, they did honk their horns late at night. I got that. Like, I don't know why the leader of a country, our country, especially Canada, wouldn't have walked out and said, okay, let's talk about this. Let's see. You know, if you're, I just don't see them as being that far fringe, but instead he decided to take the opportunity to create more division, to make more people angry, instead of trying to, like, let's get our country back together. Let's stop fighting all the time over everything.
So I'm one of the more crazy rightists, if you will.
Yeah.
So I attended the rally one weekend before. This is the Freedom Rally in Ottawa I'm talking about, in February, before it was broken up. Yeah. And the reason was I was not invested in the movement in any way, but watching it, and this is where when I talked about YouTube and the power of YouTube, I would sit here in my office and I would watch on my big TV, 60-inch TV in my office all day, the media going on about what was happening in Ottawa and the craziness. And then I'd have my laptop going beside me while I was doing some work, and I would be watching live YouTubers talking and meeting with the people that were down there. And they were diametrically opposed visions. You had the media that was going on and saying that this is radical, anarchist, terrorists, these people are not good. And then you've got families of children playing hockey downtown with music, and they're dancing and singing. And this is somebody live, literally streaming like we are right now to tens of people.
Tens of people. That's right.
But they would have tens of thousands of viewers on YouTube watching them. So that's what I said. I said to my daughter was 12 at the time. And I said to my mother is 67 years old and watches a lot of regular scheduled broadcasting.
Yeah.
And she said to me, you cannot take, my daughter's name is Harlow. You cannot take Harlow. You're going to get, there's going to be a problem. It's going to be broken up. The police are going to do stuff. And I said, I have a background in law enforcement. We're good. We're fine. Don't worry about this. Mm-hmm. And we went down, and my daughter was like, I have no idea what they were going on about. Mm-hmm. They were feeding people by the thousands. They had pancakes. They had, like, it was carnival in Montreal. Like, it was really a very different dynamic than what was going on. Now, at the end of it, when they came out and said, listen, okay, we're writing you now and it's time to go. We've got your piece. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. There was a group of people that stuck, and they stuck to cause shit.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. There's always going to be that element.
100%.
Yeah.
And there's the group that went in and tried to arrest the Peterborough police. And they're there to cause a scene.
They're crazies.
Right? And that's where we have to figure out how we have exactly and again, this goes full circle to what we were talking about and leads into your book, is that how do we have these round table conversations, the dinner table conversations, and not get angry,
Yeah.
not get heated, just relax. I hear you, you hear me. Let's sit down and take a second. And I think that's where we have to get back to a holistic view of what it is to be Canadian, first of all, because that's what it was to be Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
And we've lost that conversation. And like you said, and I agree with you, Ross, that's very American.
It is.
Reaction, very American.
It is very American.
Right.
I know. I hung out in America every winter for several winters, and I hung out with the Proud Boys, supporters. I mean, the deep Southern folks. Yeah, they are true. They're first of all they're religious fanaticism and political fanaticism. They don't just disagree with the Democrats; they hate the Democrats, and the Democrats, frankly, hate the Republicans. It is on the verge of civil war in the United States. I hope we're not going there. I just don't like the rhetoric. I don't like people demonizing the opposition. That's what drives me nuts. Yeah. Why can't we get a leader to step up and say, here's what I propose I do, and then lay out a decent plan, and then let them criticize, because you'll always be criticized, but give me a plan, give me a reason to support you, and not rhetoric, not because you're going to build highways and I'm going to build hospitals. That's the BS of politics that just drives most Canadians, Americans, most the people in the world despise politicians because of that name calling. Like Trump was the biggest name caller ever. I mean, Lion Ryan and all these, crooked Hillary, lock her up. But his whole campaign was built around hate, and I think that's not good. That's not good. No. Anyway, guys, look at. I think I appreciate hearing your point of view.
No way, you can't go.
I'd like you to think. I'd like you to follow Toastmasters. I want to just get a plug in. For a passion I have about Toastmasters. I have entered several competitions as a public speaking competitions throughout the years. And 11 years ago, I competed on a platform with a guy that I thought was really good then. And he's from Sudbury. He's a French Canadian. He is a member of a French speaking club, but he competes at the English level. And his name is Alexandre Mott. Okay. He is going to be competing on the world stage in Nashville next week. And if you could clue in to Toastmasters International Convention, if you can just find out when those guys are speaking. This one fellow, Alexandre Mott, practiced his speech with our club a couple of weeks ago. And you're going to love this title because it goes right to what you were saying. His speech was about a family reunion, not getting along, disagreeing politically. You're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. And it comes to the conclusion of his speech is that if we would only listen to each other, just listen. Yeah. Listen. Don't accuse. Don't interrupt. If we just listen.
I love it.
Wonderful speech. I hope he wins with that. Whoever becomes the world champion becomes a very wealthy person, and really a lot of influence. And it's coming up, and it's a great thing. I've really enjoyed being with you guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, Ross,
there's a story I want you to tell because before the show, before anyone got to hear, we heard that you got to work with Trudeau.
I did.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we get that story in before we get 12 stories I was hoping to get in, but that one I definitely want to get in.
Let me tell you this story. The guy by the name of Ted Curl, he used to be on television in Toronto back in the 60s and 70s. And Ted Curl had an association with the radio station where I worked. And he came to me during the election, and it was Stanfield, who was the PC candidate, Robert Stanfield.
Yep.
And he looked like an old vulture. And of course, we played that up because Trudeau looked like a cool guy.
Oh, yeah.
Ted Curl was a television personality, and he asked me if I would like to join the campaign. I said, why not? Yeah, I mean, I'm just on the bandwagon with Trudeau too, and this is great. And so he put me in charge of a hospitality tent in Oshawa. And we had bands come and put on concerts. We raised money for the campaign. And of course, Trudeau won that year. And I actually got a chance to meet the man himself. He came to the Oshawa Center or the arena, and he met every campaign worker. And I thought I was in the presence of someone very special.
Yeah.
He was, there had to be 200 of us lined up and just waiting to shake his hand. But when he shook our hands, when he thanked us, we really felt that we had contributed something significant to his victory. And it was just an amazing feeling. He was an amazing guy and one of our great leaders in our country.
No, for sure.
In spite of, and even if you don't agree with him, a lot of things he did, some people still complain about, like official bilingualism. But I think that's okay. I mean, I'm proud to be a Canadian. I'm proud that, hey, look, it was the French that did all the exploring in our country. You know, that's why we have the McDonald-Cartier Freeway. You know,
Right.
No, and like we said when we first got started here, Ross, is that again, kind of the political lines is that I come from a very liberal family where Trudeau was, you know, like you said, the Trudeau mania. I love that you're talking about his competitor being like a vulture. That's very, you know, Kennedy Nixon-esque, right?
It was exactly like that. That's
Perfect.
right.
I love it.
It was fun being on the cool guy side.
Right. But
Yeah.
no, like to have that, and then where I see, like he was leadership. He was the essence of leadership at the time in a true crisis. And I talked about earlier about, we were talking a little bit about the FLQ crisis and Pierre Laporte, who was murdered and kidnapped and that sort of thing.
Right.
And dealing with that. And my father, my late father, he said to me, he goes, when you have somebody there, and Trudeau was not a big man by any means, but he swung, he's had power, and he had determination in what he was doing. And the line of, well, sir, you can't go do that. You can't shut down. You can't invoke these acts. Watch me.
Watch me.
That's leadership. And that to me is guts and the bravado that's needed.
Yeah.
And I think that his son fell a little short on the ladder. So
he did it for good
You know what? Every son does. I mean, every son does. I've worked with guys who took over the businesses, and they were useless. But and listen, I never would have been as good a preacher as my daddy. My father was a preacher, and he was great.
Okay.
Yeah. I love it. Ross, give us a little lowdown on what you're doing with your books. Let's get something in there for people that are
Actually,
talking.
it's a podcast he's moving on to.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. My podcast, it's going to start as soon as my website's ready, which I think will be next week. So I'm looking to a launch next Wednesday.
Okay.
It's called Leaving a Written Legacy, How to Write a Book of Your Own. And in the first episode, I talk about why would you bother doing this? And most people are going to say, I'm not famous. I'm not rich. You know, what? Who cares about my life? And I admit that, you know, maybe not very many people will care about what you write about, but some will. And here's the key to the reason I think that is so vital is the fact that, yes, we will die and our voices will absolutely be silenced forever, but our thoughts, our words, how we lived will carry on for centuries, that people will have a perspective on COVID-19, for example.
Yeah.
How did you get through COVID-19? Who do you know passed away from it? How did that affect your day-to-day living?
Yeah.
We are the generation that leaves that story behind. 200 years from now may be unimaginable, but it goes by fast. I can't believe I'm this age now. I think I'm still 35 and still having fun and still doing all the stuff I love to do.
Yeah.
But that's the essence of the podcast is I want you to think about it. I want to give you a reason for doing it. Secondly, I want to tell you what kind of content you should include in your legacy book. Third, how to start writing and how to get it written. Second, once you've got it down, there's two things you got to do. You got to get it down. Otherwise, you procrastinate. Get it down and then get it right. And that's in the editing process. So the editing is important. Then finding a publisher, somebody who's going to print your book and maybe distribute it. Maybe you'll just do 2 copies, you know, for both of your kids. It doesn't matter. Then the final thing we talk about is if you want, now you've got your book, should you promote it? And if you should, what are the best ways to promote your book? So that is the 6 episodes, little over an hour of chit-chatting about leaving a written legacy.
And where can we listen to it starting Wednesday?
Starting Wednesday, yeah.
Where, like, what is it?
It's going to be on BuzzFeed. It's going to be on YouTube, and it's going to be on. I don't have them all listed here, but virtually every one of the sites that we get, Instagram and such, and Facebook.
Well, you should check in our podcast on September 15th. I have this wonderful lady that I've never met. In fact, she lives in another country that I don't really know yet. Yeah. I met her through LinkedIn because I had this other business called Autism in Perspective, and we were kind of got together. And she's a ghostwriter. And what she does is she takes your story, she talks about how she gets to know you so she can understand your voice. And then you guys write a story together. I'm super excited, but it's all the stuff you're talking about where she talks about, like, I want to bring out people's stories because everyone has an important story, no matter even if you don't think so. And that's very cool. That'll be an interesting podcast to watch. And I hope our profiteers here, I'll tell you, go over to BuzzFeed and check it out. It'll be great. And Ross, Lisa was 100% correct. You are the man that this podcast needs. I'm telling you, we need you again. So I am going to find a time that we can have you back on because I know I love talking with you. Pat, I just know Pat well enough to know that he can't, like, there's questions in his head rolling right now that he's like, I'm going to be nice. I'm not going to ask him because I know this man wants to leave, but I know he's holding them back. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming. And we're going to talk. We're going to have you back. Maybe after your podcast launches and we can talk about that a little bit and talk more about politics and business. Pat?
That'd be great. I'd love it. I've enjoyed it. You guys are great.
Right.
Reminds me of early days in radio when all the guys were like you. I mean, we're all the same age and we all had all kinds of spunk and we all had we were so opinionated and that was what made it so rich.
Right.
Such a great life.
Absolutely. No, for sure. Well, Ross, thank you so much. Obviously, we appreciate you coming on here. You are a wealth of knowledge and experience and I can't wait to hear what you're doing with your stuff. And I really hope that you think about coming back onto this because, like James says, I have so many other questions. And I love hearing people like yourself that have lived a life, that have experience, and that are willing and able to pass that on to people because so many people aren't. Like in this sort of platform, people get shy, right? So to be able to do what you do in what you do, I love it, pal. So I appreciate it. So with that, every time we do one of these lives, we do a little sign off. James has got to sign off. I've got to sign off. And then we put our special live guest on the hot seat. You'll probably be able to handle it because you're a bit of a...
He probably has about 10 of them in his info bag.
Let's go.
We've each got a little slogan that we do. So as we're wrapping it off, mine is always, folks, thank you so much for joining us at Soaring Profits. Please like, subscribe, and share. And let's make some money together, folks.
Ross, you've been wonderful. I'm so glad we had you. We got to have you again. This has been a great podcast. And profiteers out there, check out his stuff because it's going to be amazing. And let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together.
And Ross, you're up. What do you got for us?
Any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain. And most fools do. Don't criticize. Don't be the critic. Go for it and go with the gusto. I've enjoyed tonight. I've enjoyed you guys and your enthusiasm, your zest for living in life. And I'm very impressed. And I'd love to come back and visit you again.
Ross, you killed it, pal. That was awesome.